Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben, and in this video, I'll talk about everything I read in the last week. I'm impressed by how much I was able to get through in a week, but I didn't touch any manga or graphic novels or anything, so the numbers aren't as high, but I feel like I got through more book this week. Starting with Dune, which I finally finished. I've been reading Dune since like February, off and on. I've been listening to the audiobook from Libby. It goes away and I have to wait a month for it to come back. So then I have to go back a chapter or two to kind of acclimate myself, to remind myself of where I was. Finally just sat down and said, I've got 5 hours of this audiobook left. I'm gonna take today and tomorrow and really focus in on it. And I really liked it. I thought it was incredible, especially given the time that it was written, how just clean it is and how narratively consistent the world building is. I love well-written political intrigue, and I felt like it did enough to explain the world to you where you could follow what's happening, but it didn't become like burdensome or feel artificial, feel like forced, the things that they were letting you know about the world. This was one of 10 new series that I was going to explore this year. I have a video up for that on my channel. And this one, I definitely think that I'm at least going to pick up the next book. There's a video out there on YouTube. If I find it, I'll put a link in the description that talks about the different parts of Dune and like how far should you read into it if you want different experiences. And I feel like a lot of people say the first 4 books are like the original vision for the story. After reading things like the Dresden Files or Stormlight Archive or Discworld, that 4 books is not a big ask. And I did enjoy a lot of what I experienced in the first book and want to see how the story continues. So right after finishing up the audiobook, I picked up, I think it's called Empire of Silence, the first book in the Sunkiller Chronicles, which is another one of the series that I want to read. And as I was listening to the beginning of it, I was reminded that a lot of people consider the Sun Eater Chronicles, the Sun Eater series, a spiritual successor to Dune, and I was noticing all the similarities in the openings. So rather than be annoyed by that or feel like, oh, this is so derivative, it was actually really interesting to jump from one to the other. And so I think that might be my approach as I try to go through these 2 series, is maybe I'll read a Dune and then I'll read a Sun Eater and kind of see how the stories match up and how they diverge. But already I'm only about an hour into the audiobook for Sun Eater, for Empire of Silence, but already I can see a number of parallels, not just with the character work, but also with the world building. And I thought that was really neat. If you are like me and have never picked up Dune before and you want to read a classic of sci-fi fantasy, I think it was a worthwhile read. I'm interested to see the movie now, to see how it matches up with what was happening in the story. I have watched the old film like years ago when I was in high school, I think. I don't remember caring for it very much, but I think it's much maligned as a failed adaptation, and I've heard good things about the newer adaptation, so I do want to take a look at that. And maybe I'll post some sort of reaction or comparison video there, or a comparison between Dune and Sun Eater. It was a lot of fun, and it was a really cool ride. I thought the world building was excellent. Again, I liked the political intrigue. I thought the characters were well developed. So, really solid one. 5 stars for me. Like, fairly comfortable 5 stars, not like a rounding needed to happen. Next up, I read Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. This is a signed copy that I got from Barnes & Noble. This one is, just as the title implies, it is arguing that tuberculosis is so prevalent and so widespread that it touches a lot of our history and culture and aspects of our lives. The core argument of this book is that tuberculosis is the world's most deadly infectious disease and has been curable since the 1950s or 1960s, at least treatable by then. And it's insane that we let that continue to happen. So tuberculosis is like the number one deadly infectious disease every year for the entirety of human history, very likely prehistory, except for a couple of years in the 1300s or 1400s, the bubonic plague. Bubonic plague took first place for like 3 years, I want to say. And so the idea that we have the tools to combat it, but as repeated several times in this book, the disease is not where the cure is, and the cure is not where the disease is. And so it takes this stance that there is a social, political, and oftentimes racist motivation for this disease to continue to be as widespread and deadly as it is. I'm reading it partially because I'm trying to increase my number of nonfiction reads for the year, but also this is a book we're considering for our AP laying class next year. We didn't really have a book that was like science motivated, and that's one of the major things that they can pull from for their evidence on one of the argumentative papers they write. So we really wanted to have one that was like sciencey, and I feel like this walks a very good line between some of the science behind it and also like politics and also social order. I find John Green's prose, at least in the nonfiction, flow really well. I think it's very approachable. It doesn't get bogged down in a lot of technical aspects, and when it does, it kind of is tongue-in-cheek, like, oh yeah, we have in the field of tuberculosis, we have an acronym for everything, like this one, this one, this one, this one. So it's kind of like playful with it. There are parts in here that were very insightful. There were parts in here that were a little like tongue-in-cheek funny. Like, he has a voice that it feels like you're just listening to him chat with you about something that he is really interested in, and he's really excited to tell you all this information about it. But at the same time, there are some deeply, deeply poignant stories in here. Some parts where I had to stop and walk away for a second and kind of compose myself so that I can continue reading through the book. It describes not only the victims of tuberculosis, but also their families. That's another one of its core conceits, or its narrative thrust, its purpose. When you hear 1.25 million people have passed away from this disease every year, even when you put that into like every month, the number is so staggeringly high. You might be able to imagine what a stadium of those people feels like, but you can't imagine the families and the personal story. For what it's trying to do, I thought it was beautifully written. I gave it, again, another 5 stars for me. I think it's a very relevant book. I think it's a very insightful book. I think that it does a lot of different things very effectively, and I would definitely recommend checking it out. If you just want like a quick nonfiction read, if you want to learn more about this disease, or you just enjoy watching John Green's YouTube videos, the audiobook for this is available on Spotify. If you have a Spotify premium account, it is free, and it is narrated by John Green. So you can just listen to John Green talk about tuberculosis for a couple hours and get through the book. So pretty cool. And lastly, this week we have Grady Hendrix's Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, which was one of my 25 for 2025. This is one of the new books coming out. So I did 10 books that were sitting on my shelf, 10 new releases for 2025, and then I think 5 comics that were coming out this year. Is that how I broke it down? Something like that. Anyway, so it's on my 25 for 2025. I'm really interested in Grady Hendrix's work. I've read a number of his titles. I've read Horror Store. I've read My Best Friend's Exorcism. I've read his nonfiction book, Paperbacks from Hell. And now I've read this one. And so I want to talk about this kind of in the groove of a Grady Hendrix book. What can you expect from here? And I think that this one most easily compares with My Best Friend's Exorcism, which I have right here, and is currently my favorite nonfiction from the author. I think, honestly, Paperbacks from Hell is probably my favorite thing that he's written, because it was just immensely entertaining and very informative. But if we're talking about the fiction side of it, I think My Best Friend's Exorcism is my favorite. And part of that reason is this is set in the 80s. It has that 80s nostalgia. I'm not really a child of the 80s, but I'm close. So this one does resonate with me, some of the more pop culture references he makes in here. But I feel like these two are very similar titles to one another as far as like plot progression and things like that. Major difference is this is set in late 60s, early 70s. The history of what's happening is very significant. This is not just like passing remarks to pop culture. It is very much based on these houses that were set up for what they called wayward girls, who were young women who had become pregnant and their family, but before they got married, and their families were, disgraced. And so they discreetly sent their children here to have the babies. The babies would be sold or given away to families who couldn't have kids. And then the children, the girls, would go back home and pretend like nothing happened. I really think the introduction and the afterword by the author in this one are must reads, because it does really conceptualize his entire process of coming up with this plot. There is one trend from a Grady Hendrix book that I feel is done best in this book so far. He tends to drag out endings really bad. So I remember this happening with My Best Friend's Exorcism as well. That one was okay because the entire exploration there was the friendship between these two women, and it goes on to describe their relationship as years go on. And then with Horror Store, that I think was the weakest of his, like, let's continue the story past what the actual narrative was. I feel like that one dragged way too long. I think this is the most successful. It still does that. It's still, like, the story wraps up, major thrust of the narrative is resolved, and then we have this extra chapter at the end that's like sometime later, and like, let's drag the story a little bit more. But I feel like for this story, due to its setup and due to its themes and the messaging it's trying to go for, I did really feel like that last chapter was not only well executed, but was necessary in this context. I feel like you could get rid of that part of My Best Friend's Exorcism. You can get rid of that last part of Horror Store, and those narratives would not be changed much in my eyes. But this one, I felt like you really needed to have that last chapter. This one got 4.5. I rounded it up to a 5. It's not as strong as the other two. It's not my favorite, and it's not even my favorite Grady Hendrix. But I felt like it was a solidly written book. It was a little bit toward the, like, maybe 40% mark, where I felt like the story was dragging just a little bit. But mostly, I felt like the pacing was good. We do spend a good while at the beginning with just the girls and learning who they are and what they're about. About 100 pages of the hardcover deals with that, which I felt was a good amount. There were a number of characters you wanted to establish. You wanted to establish the place that they're at, the different people that they're working with, all the women who work in the house that they're at, before you move on to the supernatural element. So yes, if you are a fan of Grady Hendrix, I think you will enjoy this. It's very much within his wheelhouse. If you're looking for like historical horror, I think that this would fit the bill. It's very much focused in on one aspect of that time, but I think it feels well researched. It feels accurate and feels real to a lot of the stuff that likely happened in these houses until you get to the end, of course, in which case, like, there are some really improbable things that occur when we get toward the climax, but that's like plot stuff. That's not like setting stuff. So another one that I would really recommend if you are a fan of Grady Hendrix, if you're a fan of horror, if you just want a nice read, possibly for Summerween that's coming up soon. So be a good one for Summerween. Repeat viewers of this segment on my channel might be like, but what about Nights? I swear, I promise, I'm going to read it tonight. I've been saying it for 3 weeks, but I need to get through this. There's some books that I got from the library that I'm probably going to take a look at as well, some comics. So I'm going to get through a couple of those tonight. And then I just pulled a stack from my TBR. There's a little bit of a hiccup right now because there's some books I can't touch. One of my coworkers asked me about recommendations for a book club for over the summer, and I was like, okay, well, here's some stuff I want to read, and it's all on my TBR. But she saw me reading Everything is Tuberculosis, and she's like, that was on the list. You're not supposed to read that. I'm like, I'm reading it for next year for AP Lang. So but I can't get away with taking a look at some of the other ones that are on that list. So I pulled some stuff off my cart that I might take a look at next week. So let's see here. So we've got The Second Guardians of Dawn, which is Ami. This is the sequel to Zara, which I read, I want to say last year, and really enjoyed. It's a YA title that feels very much like YA Sailor Moon-esque Chinese mythology kind of story. So the third one comes out, I think, in August or September. So I definitely want to get through book 2. And doesn't look like a long read. So I could maybe finish this in a day. Maybe. We'll see. So that's on the docket. Whisperwicks has been sitting on my TBR shelf for a while now. The Labyrinth of Lost and Found. I don't recall quite what this story is about, but the cover looks really cool. It's got like purple sprayed edges. And I remember, I mean, I have read the description for it. It's on my TBR cart. So, that might be another one that I take a look at this week. And then, oh man. Yeah, this is like another 500-page one that I really need to read, which is Harrow the Ninth, the sequel to Gideon the Ninth. I did finish Gideon the Ninth last year, I want to say. And I started Harrow the Ninth on audiobook, and I don't think I can. I don't think I can do it on audiobook. It's got this weird second person narration bit in it. I think I need the physical book to get through it. And this one's one that I've been meaning to get through for a while. So I think that this one's probably close to top on my really want to read for next week. So I will be back next Sunday for another recap of what I read that week, and I hope to see you there. As always, I hope your reading journey is going well. Put down in the comments, what have you been reading this week? You got any recommendations for me? Anything here that you'd like to see a deeper dive on, or you want my spoiler thoughts and do like a more detailed video? Just let me know down in the comments. Like, comment, and subscribe so we can grow this corner of our BookTube community. And until the next one, take care.